Hello and welcome to the I3 lecture series hosted by the Masters in Digital Photography program at the School of Visual Arts. We are thrilled to have cinema stills photographer Barry Wetcher as tonight's guest speaker. In a career spanning almost 4 decades, Barry has amassed an impressive catalog of film and TV credits, collaborating with such great filmmakers as Martin Scorsese on Goodfellas, Oliver Stone on Wall Street, Money Never Sleeps, and John McTiernan on Die Hard with a Vengeance, among many others. He has served as the National Vice President of the International Cinematographers Guild and is currently serving as the East Coast Vice President of the Society of Motion Picture Still Photographers. Awards include the Society of Camera Operators Still Photographer Lifetime Achievement Award, a Billy Blitzer Award, a Publicists Guild Award for achievement in feature film still photography. Most recently, Barry's work was exhibited at the Pickford Center of the Academy of Motion Pictures Arts and Sciences, Photoville LA and Photoville New York. Please help me welcome Barry Wetcher to our lecture series.
Thanks everybody for coming. Thanks for you guys for inviting me to do this. I kind of want to know who my audience is, so just by a show of hands, indulge me. Are there any students, SVA students? Great. And you're all photography students? Any film students? Great, one. And anybody other than Michael and David that work in film here? Great. I'm going to preface it that I've been shooting stills for over 40 years, so you're going to see some photos that were shot 30, 35, close to 40 years ago that we don't own what we shoot. So unfortunately, some of these photos are scans of 5x7 prints or 8x10 prints, so they may not be of the greatest quality. So I just want to preface that. So in preparing for this, I thought, I could tell you guys stories for the next 3 days about what goes on at film sets and actors' behaviors and all of that, but I don't think we're here necessarily for that, but maybe I'll throw in a few stories. So I've been shooting stills, as I said. We're called a still photographer, a unit still photographer, a set photographer, cinematic still photographer. Those are all the different names. And I've been doing this for almost 40 years. And I've been blessed to have worked with some really great filmmakers, as Jaime said, Martin Scorsese, Oliver Stone, Steven Soderbergh, Robert Redford, Paul Newman, Peter Jackson, just to name a few. And I've been blessed to have worked with some really fantastic actors and actresses. And I've been blessed to work with great crews. And the crew for us in the film business, that's our family, because we work 12, 14 hours a day, and you're with these people for 3, 4 months, and they're your family. So before I get into what we actually do, I'm just going to read you a few quotes from some Hollywood industry people. And the first is from Tom Cruise, who says, "The importance of still photography from films cannot be overstated. Many times it is the first image that the audience sees. It has to capture the audience's attention, and it has to represent the tone and character of the story that we're telling." Sounds simple, right? It's not. So I'm just going to run the slides, and these are just going to play continuously. Okay, so the second quote is from a man named J.J. Abrams, who's a director, producer, writer of such films as Star Wars, Mission Impossible, and Star Trek. J.J. Abrams says, "Good set photography is a critical and often overlooked art form. Capturing the spirit, movement, tone, and emotion of a scene in one still image is not just a monumental task, but an essential extension of the film itself." Billy Bob Thornton says, "The still photographer on set is one of the most underappreciated members of a movie crew that captures something no one else does, reality. They document the actor in a private moment, the moment just before the action, the nerves, the preparation, everything the public doesn't see in the movie, the soul of the set." And lastly, Wes Craven, for those of you who don't know, is a very famous director of horror movies like The Hills Have Eyes, Last House on the Left. And he writes, he or she works alone, has only the shoot to get what is needed, and does so while doing a constant dance of non-obstruction with what everyone else is doing, which is actually filming the movie. So the job is to disappear, in a way, while at the same time figuring out how to get not just a shot, but the single frame that will capture the essence of the character, a scene, or even the entire movie, without slowing things down or breaking the mood. To accomplish this takes an incredible talent. Balance is what a set photographer has to have. Brains, heart, and technique, all in balance. Get great shots and all the while remain invisible. No small feat. Photographers have been on film sets almost from the beginning, originally sent to capture images that could be used solely for publicity. They soon demonstrated they could let the public see much more. The bonds that form among cast and crew, the human side of the stars, the daring of the stunt people, the tricks of the trade behind the scenes of movie making. So those are just a few quotes from industry people to give you an idea kind of what we go through, what we do. So our main focus is for publicity and advertising and marketing. That's what we do. That's our main, foremost what we do. And I think for every still photographer, in fact, I have an SVA graduate here, David, who does exactly what I do. He does it in San Francisco. For us, the prize is to try to get one image that tells the entire story of the movie. That's not easy to do. And that's the prize. And I'll say to you that there are two movie posters for me that encompass that. One, I don't know if you guys, a lot of you guys young may not know it, is the poster from the movie The Exorcist. It's a shot of the priest under a light in the street, a street lamp, and he's looking up at a window and there's a lot of light shining through. If I see that image, I don't need any words. I know that's the movie The Exorcist. Another one for me would be the movie Manhattan, the poster for Manhattan, which is Woody Allen and Diane Keaton under the Queensboro Bridge in Astoria Park. If I see that image, I don't need any words. I know that's Manhattan. That's the pinnacle for what we can do. So our job entails a little bit of everything with photography. It entails portraiture, reportage, a little bit of street photography. But we're always trying to tell, we're storytellers. We're always trying to tell the story of a scene in one image, trying to give an emotion, if it's a single shot, an emotion of the particular character that helps tell the story. But we're always trying to represent the filmmaker's vision of the project. That's key. That's really, really important to us. In a way, we're kind of like photojournalists, not only capturing the images for publicity and advertising, but capturing those moments in between actual scenes, those candid moments, our access affords us the ability to capture. So you see my work on posters, billboards, bus shelters, buses, magazines, newspapers, online, today social media. When I first started, those of you from my generation will remember there were 8x10 photographs in front of movie theaters, 8x10 stills. That's where you see our work. For us, we're always trying to balance the art with documenting what we need to get for the studio. So we have a lot of masters. When I say masters, we have to answer to a lot of people. We have to answer to the studio publicity department, and we need to get what they need. But then there are the moments that photographs, some that you'll see here, that a photograph like that, never be used. They'll never be published. But for me, it was a moment that was a strong visual for me. So those are the moments that really juice us up. And those are the moments that I live for. So I'll say that for me, people always say, what was your favorite movie that you worked on? There's really not a favorite movie. For me, there's three aspects to a film set. One, And if one of them is there, it makes me happy. The first one would be, is it visually interesting? Is it juicing me as a photographer? And that's really the key thing for me. If I have that, I'm really happy. The second aspect is are the performances just blowing me away? Am I happy to be like 4 feet away from you watching Meryl Streep do a scene? I can tell you that I did a movie with Daniel Day-Lewis, and he made me cry. So if a movie has that element, I'm happy too. And then the third element would be, is it a fun experience? Because film sets are not always fun. They can be tense. There could be some pretty nasty people. So if a movie has one of those three elements, I'm happy. If it has all three, that's the best. So a good still photograph, as I said, for me, is something that tells the story. It tells the story of that moment, of the movie, of that scene. That's what we all strive for. I'm going to give you a little history of how I got to where I am. I started out in a route that you guys probably didn't take. But like many people here, maybe the first time I saw a photograph come up in a developer, I was sold. It was magic. That was it for me. I took a class at the New School, and I had a mentor. The guy's name was Dennis Simonetti. And my first paying job as a photographer was I assisted a photographer who only shot books with a 4x5 camera for the New York Times book review. It was the most boring job I ever had. That segued into other assisting jobs, and then I got a job as a staff photographer for a publishing company. And then I had always remained doing my own work. I work with a wide lux camera. I don't know if you guys know what that is, but I work with a wide lux camera, and I applied for a grant in the 70s. And there was a program called CETA, C-E-T-A, where they gave 500 grants to 500 visual artists across the country, and I was one of those people. And we got $10,000 a year for 2 years, and believe it or not, you could live on $10,000 in those days. So when that grant ran out, I needed to get a job, and I had a friend who was an assistant director who offered me the opportunity to work on a low-budget, non-union horror movie, and I did it, and I liked it. And then I really didn't know how to get another job in the film business, and I had never shot stills until that. It was something I never thought about. So I scoured the trade newspapers, Backstage in particular, which is a trade paper for actors. And I saw an ad, this company was looking for a film crew. So I applied, and I went for an interview at this office, this ratty office on 14th Street, and it turned out to be New Line Cinema, who had only, in those days, had only produced John Waters movies, like Pink Flamingos and all these really wacky movies. And they were going to make a horror movie, and they hired me to do stills. And it was sort of, for me, a legitimate movie with real actors, Jack Palance, Martin Landau, Donald Pleasance. Even though they were has-beens at the time, it was a real movie. And that kind of started my career. And right after that, I was hired to do a John Sayles movie called Baby, It's You, which was a Paramount picture. And I got into the union, and I met on that movie a man named Michael Ballhaus, who was a very well-known German cinematographer who used to shoot for Werner Fassbinder. We became really good friends, and Michael introduced me to Martin Scorsese, and I got hired to do Marty's movie called After Hours, which was a movie that, a movie unlike any Marty movie he'd ever done. And at the time, Marty previously had done the movie New York, New York, which was a complete box office bomb. And he needed to prove to the studios that he could make a movie, bring it in on time. So he did this movie After Hours. I think we did it in 9 weeks. It was 45 nights, all nights. Anyway, that sort of legitimized me because I did a Martin Scorsese movie, and that just propelled me further and further. And here I am today, almost 40 years later. So I'm just going to get back to to the movie posters, which we call one-sheets. Again, we're always striving for that, and we don't always get to do that. Sometimes they hire outside photographers like Annie Leibovitz or Frank Alkenfels to shoot gallery stuff, but sometimes they do use our things. So I don't have the posters here, but I'm just going to give you an example. On the movie Unfaithful, I don't know if you guys are movie buffs, but it's an Adrian Lyne movie. Adrian Lyne is a well-known director who's done a lot of sexual thrillers, like 9.5 Weeks, which I also worked on, Fatal Attraction, Indecent Proposal, Flashdance. Anyway, the movie Unfaithful, there's a lot of sex, and sex scenes are closed sets. They don't allow still photographers in. In fact, they don't let many people in. So I really was unable to get the passion of this movie, because the movie is really about passion and infidelity. And we were going to do the last sex scene, which was going to take place on a couch. So I went over to Diane Lane, who was the actress, and I politely said, "Diane, I've not been able to get anything. Would you mind if I'm here for the scene?" And she said, "Sure." And that became the poster. Those photos became the poster. Another example would be the movie Avalon, a Barry Levinson movie. Again, I don't know if you guys are movie people, but it's a shot of a man. It's a story of family and what happens to family over the course of a few generations. It's a shot of our principal character. He's just arrived in America, and he's walking through this park in Baltimore called Electric Park. And it's lit beautifully. There's all these lights. And the way the shot goes, it's a dolly shot that follows this man down the middle of this park. So because it was a dolly shot, I couldn't really get a good shot of this man walking through the park centered. And much to Barry Levinson's credit, he said, "I think this is going to be the poster." And after we were done with the takes, Barry said to me, "I want you to get on a dolly with your camera, and we're going to recreate the scene for you a couple of times." And we did, and it became the poster. So things do happen. Sometimes you can't get the shot right there, so you have to ask to recreate it. Oftentimes that doesn't go well because the actors don't really give it their all. I'm going to talk about workflow, our workflow. So when I used to shoot film, I'd hand it off to a teamster, which is a guy who drives a truck or a van, and he'd take it to the lab. Lab would process it. It would come back to us. In those days, we shot black and white and chromes. The chromes you could edit, but the black and whites you couldn't. You just got contact sheets. So in our business, the actors have what's called kill rights, meaning they can kill any photograph. In their contract, depending upon who they are, they can have up to 75% kills. That means that they or their publicists look at every frame that I shoot and can say no, 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 yes, yes, yes. And depending upon the actor, it could be as much as 75%. So in those days, you couldn't edit your black and whites because they just looked at contact sheets. You could edit out some slides, and you give them slides, and sometimes slides came back with holes. People that put knives through them. So those are the old days. Today with digital, the process is I shoot raw. I download into a program called Photo Mechanic. I don't know if you guys know what that is. It's a software browsing program that many photo editors use. You can't really make adjustments. It's more about just going through thousands or hundreds of images really quickly. So I do a two-process thing. First, I zoom in 50 to 75%, so I'm just looking for focus. Anything that's soft goes away. Any funny faces goes away. Closed eyes goes away. Once I'm done with that, I go back, I zoom out, and now I'm just looking at composition. So I'm looking for peripheral stuff that's in my frame that shouldn't be there, lights, people, anything that I think shouldn't be there. And then I edit it down to a reasonable amount of images that comes out to maybe 1,500 images a week. So over the course of a movie, I'm shooting, close to 25,000 images, which sounds like a lot, But then if you take the actor's kill rights into consideration, it's really not. So I did the movie Ocean's 8. A movie like that has 8 principal women who all have kill rights. So any scene that they're all in, you have to overshoot because the odds of getting one photograph that they're all going to agree on is slim to none. And you'll see here, there's a photograph of the 8 women in a subway car. That shot is composited because they can never agree on one photo. So the studio composited that photo. And that was the photo, that was the lead photo that Warner Brothers let out. So then once I've done that process, then I download to a hard drive. The hard drive gets sent off to a lab in LA. Oh, and I must say that if there's an unusual lighting situation or if I'm off on my exposure, I'll make a JPEG, correct it in a JPEG, send it along to the lab with a note saying, please correct images so-and-so to match this. Let's see what else I can talk about. Working on a movie set is life-sucking. Sucks the life out of you. So it can be a lot of fun, but you have no life. You really don't. And I would say I live in Long Island now. I didn't used to, but now I do. So my day, I might leave my house at 5 o'clock in the morning, and I'm not getting home till 10 o'clock at night. And then I got to get up at 5 o'clock again the next day. So it's a rewarding career, but it takes its toll on you. So anybody who's going to enter the film business, just know that it does take a toll on your life. And especially if you have children, it's really, really hard. You know, all the birthdays that I missed of my children, I regret that. And today, I think the younger people who work in film, they might take a day off for their child's birthday. When I came up in the business, you couldn't do that. Unless your mother died, you had to go to work. You know, you had no option. That's the way it was. You know, I come from an old school kind of experience with film. What's that one last thing? I'm the vice president of an organization called the SMPSP, which is Society of Motion Picture Still Photographers. We're about 50 members worldwide. We have members in Australia, Iran, Poland, Canada, all over Europe. We're a nonprofit group of photographers who are dedicated to furthering the art and appreciation of motion picture photography. If any of you enjoy what you see here, I would suggest that you visit our website. This isn't a pitch, it's not a, but you'll see some really incredible photographs from many movies that you might recognize and you might not recognize. So I would just recommend that. I'm sorry.
I'll pass around the mic. It doesn't make your voice louder. It's just for the video. Please ask your questions using the mic.
Hey, Barry, thanks for doing this. You're done so much for all our still photographers in, Local 600 over the years, and I really appreciate that. But just piggyback on what you were talking about, going from when we shoot slides in black and white into digital, a lot of people come up to me, younger people come up to me and say, well, that certainly makes your life a lot easier, doesn't it? Well, in certain respects it does, but like you were saying, back in the old days, we would just put the film in a bag, give it to a teamster, they take it to the lab, and 2 or 3 days later we might see the stuff. In today's world, it's instant gratification. Everybody wants to see everything immediately. And for us, we put up to 10, 12 hours minimum a day on the set shooting. And then at the end of the day, now we're having to take all the images off the SD cards, get them onto our desktop, at least back them up once. I back up twice, because God only knows it's not if your hard drive's going to crash, it's just a matter of when. And then we have to go about doing the stuff that he was explaining, like maybe minimal edits. And Barry has primarily done feature films. In the TV stills world, the requirements have gotten like really ridiculous about editing, numbering, putting them in different files. So it's been quite an issue for the unit still photographers, but it's a lot of work. And what you were talking about, what it takes on your family life and stuff, yeah, we have no lives. And if it's a really good set, like you were talking about, it can be a dream job. But trust me, and Barry will back me up on this, they're all not like that. But thank you again.
Correct.
Thanks
There are
again.
actually some actors who don't want to be photographed, believe it or not. I mean, they're being filmed. They're being filmed by a large camera, but they don't want a still photographer there. I've always found that to be, I've never really understood that, especially when they have kill rights, because they could kill whatever they don't like. Yes, Michael.
I've worked with Barry on several movies. In fact, as I'm watching this, I've forgotten how many films we've worked on together, and seeing this has been really wonderful. Something that I thought is interesting. I work on the lighting department on a film, and he mentioned about being a big family, and just like every family, there's some dysfunction within any family. I can say that personally, I know that Barry is probably one of the top two finest unit photographers on set, in that they're never underfoot, they're never in the way of the rest of the crew doing their work, and they're not. Barry's never in the way of the camera department filming or the lighting or sound or anybody else, because there's about 100 people on the set that all have blinders on to do their job, and sometimes the unit photographer can be a pariah, and I've seen many of those, and I've never seen Barry be one of those. But I don't know if you wanted to talk about that a little bit.
Well, yes. Well, it's a dance that you're doing. You're doing a dance on set. You're really dancing around the shooting crew, and the movie's going to get made whether I'm there or not, which is why actors know that and will often say, don't be here for this. I'll give you, there are some actors that are really gracious about it. Someone like Meryl Streep won't just throw a still photographer off a set. So I'll give you an example. I've done 2 movies with her. There was one particular movie, there was a scene, and she came over to me very quietly, whispered in my ear and said, I don't think they're going to use any stills from this scene. That was her way of saying, can you please leave the set? So not all actors are that gracious. And then there are lots of actors who love you being there. Sylvester Stallone, he really understands publicity, and he loves you to be there. He wants you there. He doesn't care if you're in what we call his eye line. So every situation is different. Every movie is different. I also want to say that when you're shooting an actual scene, like we'll take this scene, I'm a slave to the DP, the cinematographer. I'm using his light. So if his light is beautiful, I shine. My photos shine. If his light isn't so great, I don't really shine. So that's one, what I would say, downside, because I'm a prisoner to their light. I'm also a prisoner to the blocking of the particular scene. But then there's the other stuff, the moment right before a director calls action. Most people aren't watching because there's just so much organized chaos going on a film set right before they call action. But I'm watching the actor, and there's that moment where there's in such deep concentration. They're just waiting for that moment for the director to call action. And sometimes, not always, sometimes those are great photographs. They'll never be used, but they're just great photographs. Sometimes it translates, sometimes it doesn't. Yes?
I'm just curious, because you say that you have these long days and you have no life, but I'm wondering, like, once a movie wraps, do you have a week or two before you start the next movie, or does the next movie start right away?
For someone like me, as opposed to someone like Michael, he probably works like every day. Someone like, am I right, Michael? Well, you could if you wanted to. Someone like me, I have gone from movie to movie, without a break, maybe a weekend. But normally, yes, I'll have a group of time between movies. And yes, that is a great advantage, because now you're flush with a bunch of money and you can do whatever you want. I mean, the best situation for all of us is finishing a movie and knowing that in 3 weeks or a month you have another movie that starts. That is the best. But freelancing in particular, no matter what you do, whether it's the film business or anything, is an uneasy and unsettling life, and not everyone can handle that. A lot of people can't handle a freelance life. So working in film, it's freelance. Nobody's You're not working on staff for a company. You're contracted for the duration of the movie, and that's it.
So how do you shoot when the cameras are rolling?
Very good question. So if you shoot while the camera's rolling, obviously sound is going to pick up the shutter speed and you're going to disturb the actors. So previous to mirrorless cameras, whether it was film cameras or DSLRs, we shot in we put our cameras in what was called a blimp, which basically looks like a lunchbox. And when we shot film, you really had no access to any controls. You only had access to the focus or the zoom, and that was it. When mirrorless came, when DSLRs came about, one new company called Aquatech developed a blimp where you actually could have access to changing your shutter speed, not your aperture, but your shutter speed. So it was a very cumbersome thing, and when you had two of them hanging on you, it was about, I would say, 15, 20 pounds hanging on your neck. Not fun. Today, we all shoot, not we all, but 95% of us are shooting mirrorless, because mirrorless with an electronic shutter is completely silent. Now that has a downside with certain lights, certain LED lights, certain HMI lights, certain tungsten lights, you get what's called banding. So you have to find a shutter speed that eliminates the banding. And sometimes that shutter speed doesn't work for your exposure, or it's too slow, you can't freeze the act. So you have to then revert to a mechanical shutter. I personally use a Fuji XH1, and that is, on mechanical mode, is whisper quiet. I mean, I could shoot an interior scene, unless it's a whispering scene.
Can you talk a little bit more about ownership of images and,
Good question.
you know, just
Right.
how
So-
that works or how
right.
that feels
So
at the end of the day?
we don't own what we shoot. We're work for hire. So I don't own copyright to what I shoot. The studios own it. They allow me to use the photographs on my website. I can't sell them. I can only exhibit them with their permission. And it's kind of a drag, because I worked on the movie Goodfellas, and there's, you know, hundreds, if not thousands, of images, negatives and chrome sitting somewhere in the basement of Warner Brothers that no one will ever see, and I don't have access to it. So the photos you see here from Goodfellas, those are prints that I made while we were shooting, but there's so many other great shots that I don't have access to. It's really, it's kind of fucked up, actually.
I I just want to second everything you say. I love hearing you and seeing the pictures, because I've been in that business too. I basically quit it because I got married. So, and it's important. I'm still married. Yeah, I just married 2 years ago, and I tell the young people that marry late and you don't have the time to screw it up. So, and also being a film photographer, being married is not a good idea. It's really true. I mean, I used to just love being on a film set. I just love that type of work. And to the students in here, I mean, there's probably no harder work in photography than on film sets. But there's also no other field that I'm aware of where you learn more about photography. You shoot a film or two, you know your stuff. You know?
That's true. I don't mean to interrupt you, but I will say this, that I've worked with some, you know, world-renowned cinematographers, and you really do learn lighting. You really, I mean, it's unbelievable what you can learn. And even today, I'm doing this 40 years, occasionally I'm still surprised. I'll work with somebody and that person will surprise me with lighting that I've never seen, how they accomplished it. So every day on a film set is another learning experience. And I'm pretty jaded, but I still can learn. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Are you ever invited on the pre-production side in terms of blocking, or is the first time you step on set your only time on set?
Sometimes in pre-production I'll have, which is something I should have talked about, you know, aside from shooting actual stills of scenes and behind the scenes, we also are responsible for shooting any prop photographs or set decorating photographs. So I'll get to your question in a second. So to give you an example, I don't watch Law and Order, but in Law and Order, they use a lot of crime scene photos. That would be something that the still photographer would shoot. So those kinds of photos are done in pre-production. Usually they're done at a hair and makeup test. That's about the extent of the pre-production that I'm involved in. When you talk about blocking, are you talking about blocking the scene? I'm not quite sure what you mean by that.
Well, I mean, yeah, when they block where the lighting will be and where the actors will be.
Well, that happens every day on set. So yes, I mean that's every day, every scene is blocked. I mean the process is the actors come in, they do a blocking rehearsal, hopefully, and then the DP lights the set, and then we do the scene. So yes, it's actually crucial for me to be there for the blocking, so I know where the actors are going to be. And in each scene, sometimes it's just one moment that I want to capture. So I want to know where that moment happens and where I should be.
So it's kind of a two-part question. Before, most of the lighting and most of the look of the film was accomplished in camera, right? On set in camera, the way the DP lights the set. This is how it's going to look. Nowadays, we have a lot of DPs who will LUT according to whatever they want, whatever the director, whatever the DP wants the final look to be, right? And this is something that Deakins does. This is something, I mean, it's, you know, it's there are certain looks. And when we're on set, that's not what the scene looks like, right? From what we see on the screen later on. How much editing, how much grading are you doing?
I'm doing very little.
Very little, okay.
I other than if it's an unusual lighting sequence that I feel I need to tweak and I didn't get it in camera, I'll tweak it, make a JPEG, and tell a lab to match the raw X amount of raw images to that. I will often go over to the DIT tent just to see where they're at. One of the things about shooting on a movie is they shoot mostly with an Alexa. I don't know if you guys know what that is, but the dynamic range of the cameras that film movies is just incredible. There's no still camera that can come close to it. No still camera that can come close to it. So sometimes they're shooting in light you can barely see. It's like complete darkness. And you can't get, I mean, I could go to like ASA 50,000, right, just to get an image. But you go over to the DIT tent, and it's like, holy crap, man, how do they get that? Because those cameras have an incredible dynamic range. The still cameras just haven't gotten there yet. So,
what's DIT?
Digital imaging technician. So, what happens on a film set is everything's being recorded. It's going to a guy who's sitting there with a computer. He's kind of grading it at the moment. He's called the DIT, the Digital Imaging Technician. And the DP is usually in that tent. And they'll tweak, they'll have the actual aperture, a remote aperture in the tent, and he'll tweak it from there. So filmmaking is completely different today than it was when I first started. When I first started, there was no, I don't know if you guys know what is video assist. There was no video assist. So basically the operator, camera operator, was the only person who saw what's going on. At the end of every take, everybody would turn to him and say, how was it? He was God in those days. Today, there's 15 monitors on a film set. Makeup people have a monitor. Producers have a monitor. Everybody's got an opinion. So it's very, very different.
So you won't do any facial retouching either. So none of
No,
the blemishes, nothing, right? They will do that in the studio.
So what happens ultimately with our images is they go to an online. The lab has an online website that the actors or their publicists do their kills at. So you'll often see notes on that site for particular images that will say, remove that wrinkle, get rid of that piece of fat, or reduce the So that's not for me to do. That's for them to do. That's as David said, we work 12, 14 hours. I'm not going to work 24 hours around the clock. I might do that for my photo I'm going to put on my website. I will play with it, but that's the extent of it.
Hi, Barry. I have a question about the one sheet process. Is that something that you're trying to look for, or you're discussing with production ahead of time, or is it a process that happens organically?
Well, that is your hope. As I said at the beginning, that's the prize. The prize is to get that out of your unit photography. But you're talking about multi-million-dollar companies that are making, filmmaking is a business. It's a big business. So you have a whole creative advertising department that has a huge budget, and they have ideas. And they sometimes, as I said, will hire an outside photographer, Annie Leibovitz as an example, to come in and do a day or two of gallery shooting, and they'll put together some kind of one sheet. But our hope is always that they pull an image from what we shot. That's what we strive for. I mean, that's. Did I answer your question?
It does, yeah. And also, do you read the sides or the script ahead of time?
I do. I only read the first script because on a movie there's probably like 15 rewrites. Or up to what they call cherry pages. So I just read the first draft that I'm given, and yes, while I'm reading it, I can see in my head. That's just to give an example of that. Well, I worked a season and a half of Soprano. I don't do a lot of TV, but that was one show that I did. I think because I did Goodfellas, HBO thought I could do like mob stuff. But who knows why? Anyway, they found me. They hired me to do the third season of Sopranos, and they would get HBO. When you do TV, you're not on every day. On a feature film, you're there every day. So I think Sopranos, HBO was giving me, I think, 6 days. I think they had a 9 or 11 day shooting schedule for each episode. I was getting, I think, 6 days. And the photo editor trusted me enough that she allowed me to read the script, allowed me to look at what we call the one-liner, and I would say, okay, these are the days where you're going to get the best coverage. So yes, I do read the script.
From a creativity standpoint, are you usually going for what the director is trying to capture for a still, or are you getting to choose an angle that you might prefer better? Or I'm just kind of wondering, when you're on set, are you just trying to capture what the director's seeing, or do you have a choice?
I have free reign to do whatever I want. I really answer to no one other than the publicity department. I mean, I answer to the producers and the director, but yes, I'm always trying to be honest to the filmmaker's vision, but sometimes just being a little off over here, as opposed to right on top of the camera, gets me more of what I want. And I don't say this to toot my own horn, but I received an award, and I had a director of the movie Annie present me with the award. And one of the things he said was that when he saw my work, he had wished that he had put the camera over there. So yes, I'm trying to be honest to the filmmaker's vision, which brings me to a point, because basically you could say, well, why don't they just take a still from the right? There's two issues there. One is that the Alexa or any camera that's filming cinematically is shooting at a 50th of a second. So at a 50th of a second, any kind of movement is going to be blurred. The other thing is the files really aren't that big, So yes, for heavy-duty visual effects movies, if you go to IMDb, if you know what that is, you'll see. I don't call them stills. I call them grabs. The digital grabs, but they can never really be blown up that huge because the files are so small. So, when you're shooting for me, it would be so boring to shoot a completely visual, like the Avengers. I mean, that's probably like 90% shot at green screen. I mean, after a while, that's really boring for what we do, I think.
As you're shooting, are you worrying about other people on set? Because there's tons of people on set. If you're trying to capture a certain image and you have people crisscrossing in front of you, is that constantly a problem?
That's the dance you do, man. So, those of us that have succeeded are able to maneuver around that. But yes, it's a collaborative effort. You're working with, 50 people, 50 technicians on set. So I think the first time you're on a film set, it's overwhelming, but after a while, you kind of figure out what you're doing, and you know where to be and where not to be.
So you talked a little bit about how you got into this industry, and for me, this is so foreign. Like I shoot mostly advertising. I worked for B&H, not anything in this area. So you talked about being in like a union, kind of. How do people even try to get into an industry like this?
Right. Okay, so we actually have a young lady here who's exactly doing what you're saying, and I won't say it was me, but I kind of told her what I thought she should do. So if you're interested, first of all, let me say this. When I first started, we are unionized. The mothership is called IATSE, which means International Alliance Theatrical Stage Employees. And then within that, each craft has a local. Excuse me. So our local is the camera local. We're called the International Cinematographers Guild, Local 600. So that encompasses cinematographers, camera operators, focus pullers, digital imaging technicians, loaders, and still photographers. So yes, there is a union, and basically any movie or TV show shot in New York, except if it's super low budget, is going to be unionized. So when I first started, there was very few opportunities. It was really a father-son kind of union. Today, that's totally changed. Today, when I first started, there were 3 networks. That was it, and cable had just started. Today, there's so many venues, and every day there's more. So there's so many more opportunities for people to do what I do as compared to when I first started. So if there's something you're interested in, what I would say to you is if you have friends who make low-budget independent movies, offer your services for free, or if you know people who are film students that are making films, ask them if you could shoot stills on their movies, and then you'll kind of get your chops and you'll figure out the protocol of a movie set, which is first and foremost. It's what Michael was talking about, being in the way. You don't want to be in the way. You want to be invisible. You want to be seamless. So once you do that, once you've done a bunch of that, you'll network, and then eventually, when you feel you have the right amount of work, the way to get into my particular local is if you could prove that you worked, I think it's 100 days in 3 years doing as a still photographer, even if it's on a non-union movie, then they'll let you in. Or if you find a producer of a union show who's willing to hire you, go out on a limb for you, you can get in that way. But there's no test or anything like that. Did I answer your question?
Yes. In terms of equipment, what is in the starter kit? To piggyback on that question, if you wanted to get started in stills, what do you think should be in that camera bag or equipment?
So what I was saying before is today we shoot with a mirrorless you have to be silent. I mean, there's no way to do the job unless you're silent, unless you just shoot rehearsals and the actors don't mind you shooting, hearing the shutter going. But rehearsals are usually not what you want. And a lot of times in rehearsals, actors will have a little paper napkin. If they're wearing a white shirt, they'll have a little paper napkin so that they don't get makeup on their costume. So sometimes shooting rehearsals just doesn't work. And actually, in today's world, there's very few rehearsals the way it used to be. In fact, I'm just using Scorsese as an example. On Goodfellas, he would rehearse 6 or 7 times before we actually shot the scene. So that's rare. You don't really see that anymore. That's old school.
We shoot the rehearsal.
Right, that's right. Today they shoot the rehearsal. So getting back to your question, as I said before, you need either a mirrorless camera that can shoot electronically, meaning completely silent, or you need to have a DSLR, a film camera that you could put into a blimp. And then I would say...
Studio lights?
I'm sorry?
Are those necessary? Studio lights? Do you set up a studio for
no,
portraits?
Well, it's what I was talking with you before. Actually, one of the advantages of working on a film set, normally on a film, we'll shoot in the stage for X amount of time, and I'll try to set up a little gallery, a little seamless, and either I'll bring my own lights, which would be pro photos, or I have access to all the lights in the world with the electricians and the grips, and they're more than willing to help you. I mean, the only problem with that is you're not going to get a F11 stop per se, So, and then I would also suggest maybe that you had 2 zooms, a short zoom and a long zoom, and maybe one or 2 primes. Maybe a 50 and a, I don't know, 80. I would say actually like a 35 and maybe a 105 or an 85. Yes.
Just wanted to talk about what you were mentioning about shooting rehearsals. I just finished this movie in San Francisco They shot most of it in England, and they came over for 3 weeks and did the exterior San Francisco stuff. And the main actor, I started shooting some of the rehearsals because I heard he was tough to work with. But then when he started getting into shooting the actual takes, I realized, he wasn't in the right wardrobe. And throughout the whole first couple of days, he never was in the proper wardrobe during rehearsals.
Right.
He'd give a pretty good performance.
Right.
So my notes to the studio were, make notes were just FYI, this is the proper wardrobe that he's supposed to be in. No, so I CC'd the studio and the lab just to make sure they were aware of, communication's a big thing.
Right.
And so there's just some actors that don't want you there, but to pass that along to the producers at the studio.
Well, that's the other thing is you're working with a lot of personalities. There's a lot of people on a film set. You have to navigate a lot of different personalities. And for what I do, the biggest personalities you have to navigate are the actors. And, some of them are divas, some are not. So it could be tough. I just, the last film I did was a Jennifer Lopez movie. And I'm really fortunate because she likes me, she hires me. And she's great to me. So, but other people she may not be so great to. I don't mean other photographers, I just mean other people on the crew. And that's the other thing I should talk about is how do I get hired? On film sets, I get on feature films, I'm either hired by producers, directors, or the principal actors. TV is a different story, mostly episodic TV. Correct me if I'm wrong, David, but mostly a still photographer is hired by the photo editors of the networks or cable companies. But for feature films, I'm not hired by photo editors. I'm not hired by a production manager. I'm hired by producers, directors, or principal actors. So I have some actors who have asked me, I have directors who have asked me, and producers that have asked me. So that's always great. And I also want to say that one of the greatest compliments a still photographer could get is if you show your work to an actor, and the actor says, God, I never even knew you were there. To me, that's the ultimate compliment, because you were seamless. You didn't affect his performance. He never knew you were there. He or she never knew you were there.
So I know 600 also has publicists.
Yes.
So how close do you work with a publicist on
That's
set?
a very good question. Yes, unit publicists, we call them unit publicists, are on a movie. They're on a movie. On TV, they're not so much. I think Netflix hires them, and I think Apple TV hires them for their shows, but I think the networks and HBO, there's no unit publicist. So the unit publicist is, I call them my partner in crime. They're in constant contact with the studio, so they're my lifeline or my voice mostly to the studio. They're not telling me what to do, but they can be a great help. If I have to do a gallery session, they'll wrangle the actors for me. So in that sense, they're really a great help.
What would be the starting rate for somebody who's looking to get into cinema stills?
The starting rate?
Yeah.
Starting rate would be, you could ask this young lady right behind you who's wanting to do what I do, and she's starting by working on student movies. She's working for free. Yeah. Is that what you're asking me? Or are you asking me what I make?
I'm not asking what you make, but as you progress,
if you work a lot, you can easily make 6 figures. Okay. If you work a lot. Yeah. But you're working a lot of hours for those 6 figures. So we work, because we unionize, there's a minimum amount of money you can make. And then on top of that, you rent your equipment to the company. So, and that really helps. Okay. There's the rentals of your equipment. So for instance, I get $400 a day for my equipment. That's $2,000 a week extra. So. Yeah.
When you're not shooting movies, do
Good
you
question.
still go out?
Very
with a
good
camera,
question.
Or are you just tired of using a camera?
That's a very good question. There's an expression, the shoemaker's kids go without shoes, right? It's a very, very good question. And I have to say to you that I'm, at this point, semi-retired, and I'm hoping that I could find that place that got me to where I am. So I've started.
For Mary Ellen Mark.
Right.
She started out that way.
That's right. So I've recently begun to re-pick up my wide lux camera, and I've been using that. So I'm trying to find that. I'm really trying, but it's hard. It's really hard. So what I was saying before is that while you're on a film set, there are things that juice you, right? That are totally unrelated to the marketing or the publicity. And you try to find those things, and that satisfies that part of you. But in answer to your question, I'm trying to find myself, trying to find that place. Good question, though. Very good question.
Have you done any teaching, or do you plan to do any teaching and instructing?
I would love to teach. Now, I don't want to teach like every day of the week, but I would love to. It's I was actually just talking with Jaime about this. I would love to be able to incorporate a class in a film program. A place like SVA that has a film program and a photography program, and to be able to teach either a workshop or a class. Because I really do believe that photographers, when they come out of a school like this, everybody wants to be an artist, but how many people make a living as truly with their art? Not many, very few. So there are great opportunities in what we do, and more every day, because there are so many venues that require images. And when we live in this society where we're just bombarded with images, social media is out of control, So I would hope that I would be able to do that. We'll see.
A quick question. In your 40-year or so career, did you ever work anything else in between? Because in my experience, the 15 years that I only worked on
Right.
movies, my experience was you're either in or you're out.
Right.
There's no in between.
I've been in.
You've been in, okay.
I've been in.
Because if you start working in the movie business, you either do a good job and then you're in, and or you don't, you're out.
Working in film, whether you do what I do or anything, it's really a tough life. It's a freelance life, and not everybody can do that. Not everybody has it inside to withstand that. Because there were times where I didn't work early in my career. I didn't work for 3, 4, 5 months. And you wondered, are you ever going to work again? And you start thinking, well, maybe I should have done this, but. I stuck it out, and here I am. So yes, I've always been in. I never did anything else.
All right. On that note, thank you, Barry.
What? We had a question.
Yes. Oh, there's another question.
What?
So this might be like.
I can't hear you. I'm sorry.
Sorry, this might be kind of like a dumb question.
No, there's no dumb questions.
You say that, but. What did you major in specifically, and what did you study to lead into this? Were you more film or were you more photography?
I took one photography class. When I was younger, when I was a kid, I always played around with cameras. I took a very different path, as I said in the beginning, than most of you. I didn't go to an art school. I actually went to an agricultural school. I wanted to be an organic farmer. I was kind of a hippie. That didn't last very long. I don't want to go into my sordid history, but an event happened and I needed to figure out my life. I took this class at the new school, where basically they taught us darkroom stuff, and as I said, when I saw that image come up in the developer, it was magic, sold me. I don't know, do people still do that? Do they teach film in a... You're shaking your head like it's not...
Yeah, you have to look pretty hard to find darkroom space in schools.
Right. So that magic is not, you know what I'm talking about. So that doesn't exist because everything's just immediate now, right?
High schools, a lot of high schools.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry. So no, I didn't formally study photography nor filmmaking. I kind of, if you listen to what I said, I kind of fell into doing this type of photography, but my own work was with a wide lux. I mean, I wanted to make a living from my artwork, but that wasn't going to happen. Other than the grant they had for 2 years, that was it.
Okay, thank you, Barry.
Okay.